I'm just Nick, and this is a whole bunch of Earthquaker Devices fuzz pedals. First, clean sound. Next, the hoof. Next, the dirt transmitter. Now, the tone reaper. And finally, the Dream Crusher. Now, I could wax eloquent about the lineages and types of circuits and transistors in all these boxes. Actually, I couldn't because I don't really know that much about it. Well, I did. I looked it up. You can look it up on the website. That's not what this video is about. This video is about exploring the tonal palette that is afforded you by all these fuzzes and their particular ranges of tonality and color, and asking the question which of these Earthquaker Devices fuzzes might be right for you. Our clean sound, as you may have noted, is kind of a typical Fender blackface or silverface sound. It's coming out of a car Rambler, so there's a little bit more mid-range available, but it's basically a Fenderish sound that you're familiar with. And this first fuzz, the hoof, is really all about girth and darkness. But girth and darkness with a characteristic that often does not go hand in hand with girth and darkness, and that is dynamic response. In other words, even though this is a very dark and thick and woolly pedal, though of course you can brighten it up a little bit with the tone controls, it is also a pedal that responds dynamically to your picking and playing and allows you therefore to be expressive with that thickness. It does not sound the same when you pick softly and when you pick hard. Higher harmonics and a more of an attack jump out actually as you hit this thing harder. Is a very dynamic pedal for a pedal that is so friggin' big and heavy and dark. So it is big and heavy and woolly and dark, but expressive. The dirt transmitter, a little bit more open, a little bit brighter, and particularly adept at a range of fuzz sounds that have kind of very special characteristics from a sort of zippery, nasty kind of fuzziness. Extremely dynamic to the point that if you pick lightly, it just kind of sputters. But also sounds that are strangely kind of intermodulating, like this. The reason it has this particular range of sounds is because you can control the bias on the transistors with this knob. You can under-bias it for spitty and zippery, and over-bias it for strangely and excessively fat and very dynamic. Okay? So, particularly good fuzz if you tend towards more extreme textures and you need very distinctive sounds that kind of pop out of a mix. They're not, what should I say? There's nothing generic about any of these pedals, but this one is particularly adept at very pronounced texture. This is as close as I can get. The Tone Reaper. Again, a little bit brighter, a little bit more open, and crispy around the edges. The idea. Though it is a more sort of solid and crispy and bright kind of sound, it still has a considerable amount of dynamic response. And I should mention that all of these pedals clean up very, very well with the volume control because they are so dynamic. So you may have figured out by now that we're already moving from a kind of dark, dense to light and more open. And so as we reach the Dream Crusher, last in line here, we'll see that we have a very open, very dynamic fuzz, still with a fair amount of gain and sustain, but perhaps of all of these, the most expressive and responsive fuzz. That's my phone. I'm not starting this over again. I'm going to let the phone ring. Hopefully the person's not going to leave a message. So, of all these fuzzes, I'd say that this is capable of the most solid bottom end because it is particularly dynamic, has a little bit less gain, and kind of a more open tonal signature. It's also, though, a little bit more scooped. It might have a little bit less mid-range available than some of these other fuzzes. So there's different ways of making a fuzz jump out of a mix. This one is more about the top end and a solid bottom and a kind of dynamism. But really, you know, it's hard to talk about the differences. You kind of got to hear them yourself and also see how they respond to your playing and your rig and your guitar. There's no doubt that every one of these fuzzes is just full of really, really good sounds, is very musically thought out and put together and really, really can work. I've used virtually every one of these fuzzes in at least a live situation, in some cases on recordings as well, since I've been messing around with them the past couple of weeks. And some I've used extensively, and they're all very, very musical. What I like about them, and this isn't always the case with fuzzes, they sound like fuzzes. They do not sound like distortion pedals or overdrive pedals at any setting. They have that square waviness and the particular kind of dynamic response associated with a fuzz. Another thing I like about them, they all sound different. Yes, they overlap some, especially if you start tweaking the tone controls, but they do sound different. So which Earthquaker Devices fuzz is right for you? Probably all of them. Get a hold of the folks at Rock and Roll Vintage and they'll hook you up with a set. And now, finally, the moment you've all been waiting for through this entire video. See, wasn't it worth the wait? Till next time.